Okay, and we are live, but we have to let the stream breathe just for a few seconds till I get green check marks across the board. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up podcast, presented as always by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime and fellow football priest. You know him, you love him. He is Zack Kelberman. Zack, what if I were to tell you that Gerald Casey, who is himself a five-time Pro Bowler, been to the last 5 Pro Bowls, in fact, what if I were to tell you that he compared Lloyd Cushenberry to a pair of perennial Pro Bowl centers after going against him these past several weeks?
I mean, it holds water. Gerald Casey's been up against the league's best centers, but like we always say, I hate to be the wet blanket for this topic, but what else is he going to say being a teammate of his and trying to talk him up? Obviously, the Broncos don't agree with that assessment. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put him in a competition with the likes of Patrick Morris and Austin Schlottman. But, you know, it's good to hear the praise, and it's good to see that he's winning over his veteran teammates. That's almost as important as doing his job on the field, as having a rapport in the locker room. I personally like Cushenberry a lot. I like that Gerald Casey speaking out for him, if only because it should further entrench him on the depth chart as a starting center. Given the Broncos, no doubt about it, he is their guy.
Let me read to you what he said real quick. For those of you who missed it, there's an article, on this topic at milehighhuddle.com. Here's what he said about one Lloyd Cushenberry. This is Gerald Casey. He said, quote, "The biggest thing I've seen from him, he kind of reminds me of the Pouncey brothers," which is, of course, the Steelers center Marquise and the Chargers center Mike. The quickness, the twitchiness, the way he just flows off the ball. He's very quick. He's an athletic guy. Most centers, I can hit them one way, come back the other way, and they can't keep up. This kid actually has been keeping up. He's been making the blocks. He's been understanding. He's been working in cahoots with the O-line. He definitely filled in right away. As the season goes on, you're definitely going to see him become one of the all-pros, hopefully. The kid, he's ready to go also, close quote. So like you, I do have to concur that on one hand, you do have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because, you know, it's a teammate being asked about another teammate. What's he going to say? The guy owes me $15. He's a POS. Of course not.
Right.
They're gonna speak positively 99 times out of 100. But what I like about this is he didn't just say, you know, he's really quick, you know, he's athletic and all that stuff about he's getting to the next level and stuff like that. He actually compared him to 2 specific players and then said that he thinks he's got some all-pro in his future. Now, I think that's going a little far out there, but if he's saying it, you know, I'm going to take it with a couple of grains of salt instead of just one.
That's a good way to put it. It's not like he made some generic platitude or some generic praise about Cushenberry. He specifically compared him to 2 centers who he thinks his skill set is reminiscent of. And that holds water considering Gerald Casey is one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL and has been for quite a while. Chad, you like Cushenberry. I like Cushenberry. The majority of Broncos country likes Cushenberry. It just further reinforces the notion that he is your starting center and the Broncos just wasted time, wasting those reps with other people.
The good news, though, on that front is that basically for the last week and change, Cushenberry has received 90+% of the first team reps. So even though Fangio isn't quite ready to officially christen this kid the starter, because the Broncos, of course, they're not required by league mandate to release their first depth chart till Saturday, same day the cut down deadline. So he's not going to do that quite yet. But obviously, you know, you read between the lines, and when it comes to coach speak, it's not always, Zach, what they say. You watch what they do and how the rotation works on the field.
Yeah, and you know what? At the end of the day, Cushenberry is with the ones right now. He's the starting center, so it started off rocky. We didn't like how they were handling it. We still don't like how they're handling DeMar Dotson. But as long as on September 14th, week 1 against the Titans, Cushenberry is your starting center. And no matter how they got to that destination, that's the most important result.
While we're on this topic, though, I also want to get your thoughts. And then, of course, tonight is the Mile High Mailbag because we are your football priests. Each and every week, we're here to give you the absolution and answers to your burning Broncos questions. So get your questions, any super chats you have, get them in the stream, and we're going to get to those tonight, as well as talk a little bit about how we expect this 53-man roster to shape up. But Zach, there's just two more quick quotes I want to get your take on
Yeah.
from Gerald Casey that I thought were worthy of our analysis. And the first is, we mentioned on this podcast, I want to say it was Monday, that defensive line coach Bill Collar, when asked about Draymond Jones, basically said, he's looking real good, which, coming from a drill sergeant like D-line coach who doesn't give out advice very easily, it was noteworthy. Well, here's what Casey said about Jones, how he's looked in camp so far. Quote, "He's looking nice out there. He's fluid. He understands how to play the game. His reaction time is unbelievable. He reminds me of my younger self when I could move twitchy like that. I think he's going to definitely take his game to another level. Working together and just having him out there, being able to work side by side with him has definitely been a joy." Close quote. Zach, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most likely, do you think Draymond Jones is destined to eclipse Shelby Harris or supplant him as a starter opposite of Casey this year?
You know what? It's such a loaded question, Chad. There's so many factors in play with that. I'm going to stop short of saying destined. I'm going to say he has a really good chance to surpass Shelby Harris as the starting defensive lineman on that defense. And you know what? He really came on last year, Draymond Jones. I wasn't the biggest fan of his selection, but the second half of the season, he was making play after play, and it pops on film. And Shelby Harris, it just seemed like he lost some of that momentum after last season. He found nothing on the open market. He had to settle for a prove-it contract with Denver. It almost felt like he was like, okay, I can't find anybody else. I'll go back to the old team, whatever, for another year. And the momentum, to me, based on what Collar is saying in Draymond Jones's tape, I just think he has a higher ceiling in this defense than Shelby Harris. Huge Shelby Harris fan, but Draymond Jones just has a different skill set, and I think he's more of a favorite of the coaching staff because Fangio handpicked him. He didn't handpick Shelby Harris.
This is true. It's going to be fun to see how this particular battle shakes out. Now, one more here, Zach, and then we'll move on to the topics of tonight's show, get to the mailbag, get to the stream. Here's what Casey said, and this is good insight to kind of give us a feel for how the depth on the defensive line is shaping up. What it's been like working with rookie third-rounder McTelvin Agim, what he's seen from him. Quote, "It's awesome. I think with a little more experience, he's definitely going to be ready to go. It sucks that he hasn't gotten any preseason games in to really get his feet wet, but I definitely think it's been a good camp for him. He's been showing up. He's been showing that he wants to play, that he's ready to go. It's going to really just come down to the coaches trusting in him and believing in him, but the kid is ready to go," close quote. So, Zach, of all the things we've heard him say with regard to his young teammates so far, that one definitely the most lukewarm. But really, what else is he going to say? Because as you mentioned there's no preseason games to really get a stronger feel, whereas maybe you could say the same about Draymond Jones, but at least I'd be willing to bet money some of the tape they've been watching in training camp this year and what Gerald Casey has seen is tape of Draymond Jones performing late last season, in which he was, AFC Defensive Player of the Week, not just Defensive Rookie, AFC Defensive Player of the Week, Week 16.
I actually like this by Gerald Casey because it seems like his other comment, it seems like it's more realistic. He's telling it like it is. He's not sugarcoating anything. So if he feels like someone can have all pro upside, he's genuinely meaning that. He's not just saying it as a platitude. Whereas if he thinks a teammate could use some more work, he's going to say it. So I appreciate this honesty, and it's refreshing to me from a Broncos teammate not to think everyone is an all-pro, not to think everyone is a future Hall of Famer. He's honest and he's open and he's giving some key insight as to the younger players on this defense that we otherwise, Chad, would not glean.
All right, we want to get to the mailbag. We want to talk a little bit about the roster. Hopefully most of you, all of you, in fact, have read Zach's 53-man roster prediction that was published yesterday at milehighhuddle.com. If you have read that, you'll have a good kind of foundation for our conversation tonight that we're going to have in between answering your questions. But first, gang, we got to go through some matters of business, starting with the fact that we got to remind you that this episode is sponsored by sportsbetting.com. Gang, go out there and enter a free $1 million pick'em contest visiting sportsbetting.com. You get a chance to win $1 million, few picks against the spread, over under. It's really fun. All of us here at Mile High Huddle have done it now a few times. If I'm, I don't know if that's okay, but I've done it more than once. I'll just say that's fun. and you get to see the spreads shaping up for week one and get a chance to win $1 million. So head on over to sportsbetting.com. Check that out. Excuse me, when you get some time. All right, Zach, real quick before we dive in, just want to make sure everybody knows how to find us on social media as the podcast and as MHH continues to grow. Find us on Twitter, gang. First and foremost, connect with us at Huddle Up Pod on Twitter. While you're at it, also at Mile High Huddle. You get those two accounts followed, you're not going to miss anything as it relates to the pod or breaking Broncos news and analysis. A gentle reminder to check out the merch store. Head on over to huddleuppod.com. Get your swag on. Get yourself one of these football priest hats. Get yourself a football priest or a Let 'em Hate t-shirt. There's mugs. There's face masks. There's hoodies. There's golf polos. Little something for everybody, men, women. Check it out. It's another organic way to support what we're doing. And if you're not in a position to do that, it is all good. These three things, each and every one of you can do, and you guys have no idea how much it helps us. Subscribe, like, and share if you really love us. If you love what we're doing for you, share this thing out there. Help us organically continue to grow and reach new, like-minded Broncos fans just like you. And then, Zach, one last thing. Shout out to our Facebook supporters. You know we love you. It's been growing, that group, and we appreciate each and every one of you. And let's see, I'm sure we'll see a few of them in the chat stream here tonight. All right, Zach, Amber, one of them. Much love to you, Amber. Appreciate your support. John, what's our first, who got in there first on the super chat? We got Mike Evans, bona fide MHH superstar, Mount Rushmore guy. You guys have met him. Absolute stud. Appreciate you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Always, my friend. Yeah. Are the Broncos married to Jeff Driscoll? Not trying to panic, but should we explore options? Zach, I think the Broncos would be remiss to not explore options. However, they're on the hook for $2.5 million. So it's just enough. It's not completely prohibitive of moving on if, you know, a really good opportunity arose. But it's just enough also, Zach, to make it very unlikely. Doesn't mean they couldn't add someone else, but moving on from Driscoll is very unlikely.
It's not just the money, though. I mean, he spent the entire offseason learning the offense, and he has it down now. They're going to get some guy ready to play in, a week or so, week and a half. It doesn't work that way. If Locke goes down against the Titans, they sign someone off the street right now. That quarterback has no idea what's going on. Driscoll isn't the best number 2 in the world. You know, he was on our duds of training camp for a reason, but for what he is, he's good in that role. And he's just a very nondescript quarterback who can step in, who has experience, who can kind of not mentor Drew Lock, but just be that sounding board on the sideline. Just a guy, a jag, plain old vanilla quarterback like Jeff Driscoll. As an aside, I know Josh Rosen is on the trade block now. I want nothing to do with Josh Rosen. I know a lot of Broncos fans have been calling for that trade to happen. I would not give up anything to take on that lemon at quarterback. They're fine with Jeff Driscoll right now. I wouldn't say they're married to him because there's no marriage in the NFL, Chad. That doesn't exist. But I think going into the season opener, I think he's locked in as the number 2 quarterback.
You know, I still have to beat myself up a little bit because in the 2018 class, I vacillated going back and forth on my number 1 quarterback in the class. Was it Baker Mayfield? Was it Josh Rosen? Was it Baker? I ended up, I think the final word on it was Josh Rosen, and boy, was I wrong on that. Now, in Rosen's defense, and I do agree with you, Zach, that should not even be a consideration for the Broncos, but in his defense, he has had one of the most uniquely just botched first couple of years as a pro that I think I've ever seen in the history of a first-round drafted quarterback. So, you know, it hasn't been a traditional, I would say, fair start to his career. But nevertheless, Zach, even though it's only been 2 years, he's already damaged goods. Like At least Jeff George, who went number 1 overall all those years ago, you know, he got many years as a starter, bounced around quite a bit. At least he produced. He never lived up to his number 1 overall billing, but at least he produced some games, some wins, some stats. And in the case of Josh Rosen, I really don't think that's ever going to happen. And you know, he's such a smart guy too, is Josh Rosen. I mean, I'm sure he'll take that NFL money as long as there's an NFL team willing to give it to him. But at some point, I'm sure there are countless different options that he has in life to pursue professionally that if he's going to, I mean, his name now, Zach, is synonymous with just, he's a laughing stock in many circles. So I don't know how much longer he can withstand that.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys thought Paxton Lynch didn't have between the years, Josh Rosen at this point, he is so psychologically damaged and done, and just he was sacked in Arizona, then he was traded to Miami, and they didn't want him, and he was just left to rot on the sideline, given no development, no coaching, made no progression in his own physical skill set. I just want nothing to do with the guy. I mean, he is just no upside to him at all. Mentally, like you said, Chad, I mean, you talk about David Carr when they drafted him and he got beat up behind that Texans line, 70-something sacks. It has the same psychological impact. For a quarterback, the mental aspect of the game is almost or as more important than arm strength or physical talent. It's the same reason that Paxton Lynch busted. And if you didn't like Paxton, you wouldn't like Josh Rosen.
Shout out to our latest Facebook supporter, Charles Havoc Boren. Very cool name. One of my favorite punk rock singers is a cat, I should say, by the name of Davey Havoc. Similarly spelled, but not quite. One less K. Appreciate you, my friend. We got a question here from Terry Randall. Everybody knows Terry up there north of the 49th parallel. The guy who probably, I don't have this perfectly memorized, Zach, but he's probably the guy that inspired the hashtag state of being, that little catchphrase. Yep. Terry, he says, I saw a guy wearing the number 30 on the training camp stream. He ran a route and caught the ball. Who could this be?
Wow.
Obviously, very tongue-in-cheek about Philip Lindsay, but Zach, you know, it's not like he's been a slouch in that department. He gets a lot of hate. That wrist injury really affected his ability to catch the ball, A, and B, to develop as a receiver out of the backfield. He made it a focus this past offseason, clearly jumped in with both feet. The early returns are pretty obvious. I mean, I don't think that's going to be something that coaches are going to think twice about when they ask him, you know, when they call a play that requires the running back to either catch the pass, screen, run a route, whatever it might be. I really don't think they're going to have second thoughts.
You mean a grown man with working hands can catch a football, Chad? I am literally shocked right now. And this is something we've been saying the entire offseason. He might not be a Marshall Faulk back there in the backfield, but Philip Lindsay is a very adept playmaker. And when you're a playmaker, you make plays in every single facet of the game. Catching and running for Philip Lindsay. This is why part of the reason it wasn't just the Melvin Gordon's contract. They didn't need him that much because Lindsay can catch passes. There are plays which shows him juking people out in space, making tough catches. He had one last year from Joe Flacco. He had to adjust in midair to get the pass and then put the moves on a guy for a 20, 25-yard gain. That's what Lindsay can do, and he's shown that this summer, and that's exactly why he is the 1A to Gordon's 1B.
You know, the first big play Philip Lindsay made, arguably as a Bronco, week 1, 2018 as a rookie, he scored that touchdown against the Seattle Seahawks. That was a reception, and it was a long one. It was inside the 50, but he showed early that that's an area in which he can produce. But I think this last 7-8 months, he's really been able to fine-tune it and get even better. But, you know, again, not to say there have been imperfections. That wrist injury really set him back. There were some bad drops last year. I think because he made it a focus, nothing but net, as they say in the basketball world. I think he's going to impress some people. Duke Boynton, bona fide superstar, legendary MHH community member. Much love to you, my friend. Appreciate your support. He says, the Broncos are going 19-0. Drew Lock is passing for 5,500 yards. 54 touchdowns,
no picks,
0 interceptions. Lindsay is going to run for 2,008 yards and 13 touchdowns. I love my orange-colored glasses. Hashtag until proven otherwise. Yeah, that's like, Madden mode, right? Or you're controlling everything. But yeah, love the optimism, and that's something I think we've heard maybe Terry say as well about 19-0 until proven otherwise. You know, it's very unlikely. Closest any team's ever gotten to 19-0 was the New England Patriots back in, what was it, the 07 team, I want to say, right? That went 18-1, lost in the Super Bowl. But hey, optimism, it's good, and the team could use it. It's all part of the juju right now that builds toward letting them hate, the let them hate hashtag.
That's right. And I like how specific that number was for the rushing yards, 2008. It wasn't just 2000, it was 2008. I like the additional couple scampers for Lindsay there. You know what? I'm not going to say 19-0 is going to happen, but, the Broncos being a 10, 11, 12-win team is certainly within the realm of possibility. And regardless of the record, they're going to have a very good season this year and be very fun to watch. So it's something we can all agree on.
If I'm not mistaken, 2008 is a direct reference to Terrell Davis, his 2,000-yard season. I might be off by 1 or 2 yards. I could be misreading that. But, all right, let's see here. John, do we have Dennis available if you got him? Or actually, let me see. Yeah, Dennis. Appreciate you, Dennis, on Super Chat.
Thank you.
Much love to you, my friend. He says, so if Cushenberry starts, will the Broncos keep both Patrick Morris and Austin Schlottman? If not, which one will they keep? And Zach, I think that's as good as any segue to turn toward the 53-man roster a little bit here as we also do the mailbag in the chat stream here. And let's just take a look really quick at your roster as it stands. You have both Patrick Morris and Austin Schlottman making the roster with Cushenberry penciled in as the starter. I would concur with this, although if they do end up moving on from one, it's going to be Morris as opposed to Schlottman, because I think Schlottman has proven that he's got more guard center versatility. You know, you can go back and forth. I'm not confident 100% Morris could do that, but you've got Garrett Bowles, Dalton Reisner, Lloyd Cushenberry, Graham Glasgow, DeMar Dotson, Elijah Wilkinson, Pat Morris, Schlottman, and here is, in my opinion, the dark horse that I loved to see, Calvin Anderson, who I think, you know, he's still raw and he's very improving when it comes to the NFL, but I've been impressed by this kid this summer. He's given me some hope that there is a developmental tackle option currently on this roster besides, you know, Garrett Bowles, DeMar Dotson. Elijah Wilkinson ain't it.
Right, or Jake Rogers. And I do like Calvin Anderson a lot. I think Mike Munchak is working his magic with him. Not saying he's an instant replacement or starting caliber, but just a nice guy to have on the roster. And the more offensive linemen, the better, Chad. Give me all the offensive linemen for this team right now with all these different question marks. I would take Morris over Schlottman, though. I just think he's been with Mike Munchak, dating back to Pittsburgh now. They've had some history there. I just think he has a better skill set. In terms of guard, you know, they have Wilkinson who can play guard. He's a natural guard. They have some other guys like Reisner who can play guard, obviously, both sides. He can play center. A lot of position flexibility on this offensive line, but I wasn't going to go light. I wasn't going to take 8 or 7 linemen. I want the more, the merrier, so I went with 9 there.
Glenn Hauser, stud, absolute animal. We saw him last night on the show. It was great getting a chance to chit chat with Glenn and learn some of the anecdotes from some of the coolest items he has in his awesome Broncos collection there. Glenn says Mike Florio, of course, of Pro Football Talk, NBC Sports, was all over the fact that Vic Fangio said the Broncos aren't quarantining a quarterback. And in fact, I'll give you guys the exact quote, what Fangio said, quote, on whether or not the notion of having to quarantine quarterbacks, is that something you're looking at? How serious is that as an issue? Quote, I don't think it's necessary, to be honest with you. Plus, it has to be the right guy, somebody that has experience in your system, that if the emergency happens, you have them there. I don't think our quarterbacks have been meeting together. He kind of cut himself off. Our quarterbacks have been meeting together all camp. They're socially distanced like they should be. I think most teams are doing that. There hasn't been an issue so far, knock on wood, close quote. So, Zach, Florio might be wringing his hands, doing his kind of blue check mark, for lack of a better term, you know, CV virtue signal here. I don't see any reason for it. In fact, just like Philip Lindsay talked about yesterday, which he was great in his media availability because on one hand, and he leveled with everybody on how seriously everyone still needs to take the bug. It still needs to be something everybody takes seriously. But at the same time, he was much more optimistic based on what they'd seen through training camp, not only with the Broncos, but teams across the league, that they're going to be able to get through this. And the season's going to be able to go off without a hitch. So I don't know why, excuse me, he might be Florio, that is, getting after Vic. He says, do you think it would be a poor decision by the team now to isolate a QB, or would they be fine? What's your take?
Well, first of all, I loved what Lindsay said. They asked him, what would it mean? In other words, I'm paraphrasing, what would it mean if someone went out and caught CV? He goes, you don't give a damn about me. You don't care about our team. I really love that quote from Lindsay a lot. I mean, it shows he wouldn't have said that a year ago. He's really blossoming into an outwardly public leader on offense. It's exactly what the Broncos offense needed. Digressing, though, this is what Florio does, Chad. I mean, you saw it throughout the pandemic, his takes, and he's very, like you said, the leader of the blue check marks, pandering, virtue signaling, you know, playing to the lowest common denominator of fan. And the Broncos aren't that kind of team. They're not going to pander. Vic Fangio's not a virtue signaler. He's going to do, and he made that clear. He took some heat for his remarks, Chad, during the protest. He sticks to his guns and his virtues and his morals. And if he thinks the Broncos are good without quarantining a quarterback, they're not going to quarantine a quarterback. I don't like the idea either. You can't play scared. Everyone signed up for this season. They had testing, they had waivers. They've all know the stakes for this year. And Philip Lindsay said it best. And that's kind of what I think is the heartbeat of the locker room right now, the prevailing thought. Let's all be one. Let's all be together. Let's not be selfish. Let's stay as a team and we'll be okay. We're not going to get sick. We're not going to ruin our season. And if they just follow that logic, like most NFL teams are right now, there's no need for these extra quarterback quarantine lists or anything like that. It's Florio being Florio. And he becomes more of a joke by the day, Chad.
Another thing Florio said today, and we'll get back to the mailbag and back to the roster. In fact, our next question comes from Terry that is specific to the roster. But another thing Florio brought up today, and I'm glad he said this because I wasn't aware of this. So as everybody knows, the practice squad this year is grown from 10 guys to 16, and 6 of those guys can be vested veterans, guys that no longer have any practice squad eligibility left on the old resume. Well, those 6 veterans, they don't have to be put on waivers. So you can literally go from, let's say you want to cut DeMarcus Walker, just as an example, and you don't want to, well, he might actually, as someone that has practice squad availability, he might have to go through waivers. I'm not sure on that distinction, but let's say someone else who's more of a veteran that, not Tim Patrick wouldn't be an example. It would never happen. But as an example, let's say that it was somebody like Bryce Callahan, who's got 6 years, he's in his 6th year, no more practice squad eligibility. The Broncos like him on the practice squad, but they don't see a place for him on the 53 out of the gates. They can sign him right to the practice squad, and he doesn't have to pass through waivers. And Zach, that's very freeing. But at the same time, the one thing to keep in mind, and of course, Bryce Callahan is making this roster all day long. I just had a brain fart on someone else I could use as an example. But one thing that doesn't bring up, though, is the fact that as soon as a player finds out he's getting cut and moved to the practice squad where he's going to take less money than he would if he was on the 53, if a team calls him and offers him a deal, he's gone. He can sign. So on one hand, it is a little bit, it's nice to hear that, but it'll be interesting to see how teams and players exploit that in 2018. I almost said 2020.
I don't know how many vested veterans. I mean, you couldn't even think of one, Chad, and I really can't either. How many vested veterans would even be eligible? I feel like most of the practice squad players for the Broncos would be rookies or first or second year players. I really don't see a veteran on the roster. I was going to say Jake Butt, but he wouldn't be a vested veteran.
I don't think so.
He hasn't played enough games. He's been on IR every year. So I don't think it's even to come to that. They'll probably use those spots to fill it up with players that they want to hold on to, but I really can't think of a vested veteran that would meet that criteria.
Maybe a Todd Davis, but he's not about to get cut. Maybe a Mark Barron. He's not about to get cut either. So anyway, Terry jumping in again on Super Chat this time. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
How much roster movement besides the cut down do you see happening Saturday? Hashtag football priest, hashtag state of being, hashtag MHHUN. So the one thing everyone needs to keep in mind, Zach, is the cuts are going to come. The Broncos will get to 53, might even go below 53, to be honest with you, because they're going to wait to see what happens on the waiver wire. Every year, there's that guy who makes the active roster, and everyone goes, wow, good for him. We didn't see that coming. 24 hours later, wait because they claim someone else off the practice or off the waiver wire. So there's going to be some movement. At this stage, it's just difficult to even come close to projecting that. Just kind of look at the weak points on the roster, and I think Eric Trickle did a good job kind of highlighting those spots. Offensive tackle, we've talked about that a lot on this show. Cornerback, a lot on this show. A couple other spots. So we'll see.
You said it best. I mean, sometimes they can go to 52, 51 players. You might see some, outward signings or out-of-house free agents come and visit the Broncos or sign with the Broncos. But for the most part, they're getting their own roster down to 52 or 53. They might leave one spot open. If you guys think back to 2017, they made all these cuts, including TJ Ward. And at the end of the night that night, they signed Brock Osweiler. So they brought him into the building. There was some movement there. That was more of the exception than the rule. I think you'll see some movement after Saturday, Sunday, Monday, going into game prep week. It might not be a lot of, signings. If you're looking for a player to come into the building, they're going to get their own roster down first and then explore what they want to do from there. But maybe on Sunday or Monday, they'll bring someone in the building.
Super chat and a joke here from the Wizard, the Wizzy and the Hizzy Mundungus. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you.
Coming at Juwan James once again. He says, sometimes I feel bad for James. He can't even do the rock's eyebrow. for what it's worth, I can't do the Rock's eyebrow. I can lift one, or I can lift both, but I can't lift one. Zach, can you?
I'm trying to do it, but not with the hat on. I feel like I'm just like having a stroke right now.
I have to like twist my face a little
Yeah.
bit to kind of make it happen.
There's only one rock.
Indeed. Appreciate you, Mundungus. All right, Zach. So, and William, appreciate the kind words. Shout out to our Facebook community.
Thank
we
you,
love
William.
our Facebook supporters, and we love the Facebook community. Appreciate that, William. All right, real quick here. I want to come back. We'll grab this question from David Crespin next here. But first, Zach, I want to come back to your 53-man roster prediction here. On the tight ends, all right, I thought this is interesting and worth talking about. You have the Broncos keeping 4, Noah Fant, Nick Vanette, Albert O, and not Jake Butt, but Andrew Beck. Now, I want to juxtapose that with, and I thought this was interesting, Mike Kliss unveiled, he does one every year. Everyone in the business does one each year, right? Right on the doorstep of when the cuts come. Mike Kliss had the Broncos keeping Noah Fant, Vanette, Okaway-Bunam, Butt, and then Andrew Beck as well, but classifying him on the running back side in terms of the roster math as a fullback. So that would mean they kept Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, plus all the tight ends I mentioned, and Andrew Beck. So in your case, though, you have him saying goodbye to Jake Butt, going with Andrew Beck.
I think it's overkill. This isn't Gary Kubiak's offense. This is Pat Shurmur's offense, where it's a one tight end, barely a one tight end offense. There's going to be a room for Noah Fant, and then it's Noah Fant and everybody else. I'm just not sold on Jake Butt. I acknowledge that he had a really good training camp, and I wish him well in his recovery from 4 ACL surgeries. I just like the versatility that you get with Andrew Beck. Play fullback, tight end, blocker, inline, outside. He does a lot. He's younger. He's healthier than Jake Butt. I would not carry 5 total tight ends on the roster and no more than 3 running backs. So if it was a coin flip, honestly, I just like what Beck can bring to the table. We've seen what we're going to see from Jake Butt. I don't think we're ever going to see more than we've seen from him. Can we say the same thing about Andrew Beck, though? I don't know. So that's why I'm going with him.
As you know, I take a quite a bit more optimistic view on Butt, but it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out because they have some really tough decisions to make at tight end. And like you said, if they do end up keeping 4, or as Kliss has them, keeping 5, basically, because Andrew Beck will play a little fullback, but let's face it, he's a tight end.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a lot of reps to go around in the games, 2 tight end sets, unless they're rotating Fant in and out. And you don't want to take Fant off the field because he's such a stud. So, it's one of those things where the Broncos kept drafting tight ends, trying to throw something at the wall till it stuck. And it finally stuck with Noah Fant. And now they're starting to get some return on the investment in terms of the time they put developing these guys and, getting Jake Butt healthy, for example. But it seems like it's a day late and a dollar short. Now, David Crespin jumps in, and he asks here, do you think KJ Hamler will be active for the first game? Now, we are currently, 11 days from the opener, 11 days in real time as we're streaming this live Thursday evening. He has the last couple of days, he's been back in pads. He's at practice. He's working on the sideline with trainers. He's doing some individual. So he's trending Zach back in the right direction. I wouldn't be surprised if he's inactive to open up the season, but I think he will be active. I do think he's going to be ready to go.
As long as he's healthy, yeah. You don't spend a second-round pick on a guy, then make him a healthy scratch in week 1 of the regular season. They brought him in to be a playmaker and to contribute on offense. Maybe not more so than Sutton or Gordon or Jerry Jeudy, but Hamler is a big part of this offense. And as long as his hamstring is holding up for week 1, he's going to be on the field.
Let's talk about the wide receivers real quick. You have the Broncos keeping 6, and I concur with every guy you have here. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick, Deshaun Hamilton, and Deontay Spencer. But Zach, Mike Kliss would disagree with us. Mike Kliss would say that all those same names, except he would classify Deontay Spencer as, instead of the Broncos keeping 3 specialists, they keep 4, Deontay Spencer being the 4th as the return guy, and they still keep an additional 6 wide receivers, that 6th guy, and in real math, the 7th guy, being Tyree Cleveland.
No.
And Cleveland has had, I'll admit, he's been a lot more impressive this training camp than I expected him to be coming out of Florida. But I still think he's one of those classic guys that fits too much of the prototype for waive him. If you lose him, no big thing. You're stacked at wide receiver and get him onto the practice squad.
Kliss can designate all he wants. You still have to account for that guy on the roster. It's still a body on the roster, and it's overkill to me. You don't need another person like Tyree Cleveland. You have that guy in Deshaun Hamilton. They're both Jags in the sense they don't do anything extraordinarily well. And Deontay Spencer, his spot to me was cemented. I don't like carrying 6, especially a guy who does one thing, and that's return punts. But I think KJ Hamler's hamstring injury solidified Spencer's spot. They were already iffy about playing Hamler on punts. And I think now that he's been hurt once, they're going to go to the guy they know in last year in Deontay Spencer, who Tom McMahon loves, the coordinator of special teams. So I don't see Cleveland making it. I see, like, exactly like you said, try to sneak them onto the practice squad. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but you can't carry that many receivers. And don't forget, Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay, and Noah Fant can catch passes too. You don't need that many wide receivers if so many players on offense are going to be involved in the passing game.
7th round picks in the John Elway era and across the NFL, they have long odds of making the roster. They really do. They're basically just this side of being a college free agent. They did get drafted, and there's a difference, but I mean, outside of guys like Virgil Green, outside of guys like Trevor Siemian, outside of guys, well, even Chad Kelly has a 7th round pick. He was injured his rookie year, so it doesn't really count.
Siemian.
But nevertheless, Zach, another 7th round pick. And well, first, before I go off on this tangent, I want to talk about Derek Tuska. Let's grab Mundungus super chat. Appreciate you, my friend. And he's got another pun, another joke here on Jawan James. He says, "It must be terrible to have less facial hair than an emoji." Hashtag emoji brow, hashtag emoji, or eyebrow opt out. Mike,
love it.
Bringing the funny, and we appreciate you, my friend, and keeping it light. Chad on Facebook wants to know how Derek Tuska is doing. We're going to get to that right now, Zach. I thought it was interesting what Vic Fangio had to say about one Derek Tuska, and I just want to tell you guys, I might have to eat a little crow on this because Tuska was a guy I talked about after they drafted him as one who I wouldn't be surprised to see come in and push a Malik Reed and push a Justin Hollins. Well, Justin Hollins now has been moved, so he's kind of out of the equation a little bit. Maybe not so much push a Jerry Atachu, but kind of push the bottom of that depth chart, provide some kind of like early Shaq Barrett type of impact early on. But it's not looking like it's going to shake out that way. And in fact, Zach, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a wave that just doesn't get brought back at all. Here's what Fangio said about Derek Tuska, the 7th round edge rusher. Quote, "Yeah, he needs to get stronger. He needs to develop more physically, just all of that. He came from I don't want to say lesser level of play. He's out here now. He played at North Dakota State. He's out here now with NFL players, just everything, nothing in particular, but everything. He was behind. It was evident he needs more seasoning," close quote. Zach, what does that say to you about his roster prospects in 2020?
The translation is enjoy a redshirt year, because that's what he's going to get this season in Denver, if he even stays in Denver. Like you said, Chad, it might be, they waive him and he might be not brought back to Denver. He might be a practice squad guy. He might be buried on IR for the year, but it seems like he's not going to make the 53. He needs a year at least in an NFL conditioning program. He was one guy, Chad, among the Broncos rookie class who was really hurt and negatively impacted by having no offseason. What Vic Fangio said was you would have benefited more from having practices, being able to be in the weight room from April on, being able to be on the field from early on. And that's one guy who suffered, and it's unfortunate, but it's part of the business. He was always a tweener prospect. And I thought when they picked up both of them, Tuska and Justin Sternad, one of those guys will make the roster. One of those guys will be a contributor, but not both. It was supposed to be Sternad. He was hurt. Tuska needs another year. And at least Fangio was honest, Chad. At least we're not going to keep a guy for the sake of keeping him. He needs at least another year to marinate, and whatever happens then, they'll re-explore that when they cross that bridge.
All right. Facebook user. Let me see if I can maybe deduce who this is, because I hate saying Facebook user. Let me see. It might be on the Facebook page. I think it's in the group. Just real quick, if I don't find it quickly, then we'll bounce on out of here. Oh, well. You got to give StreamYard permission to show your profile on Facebook. Just click the link. You'll see it if you go to the top of the stream. But he says, it's an interesting story. Hey, guys, so you've asked all the guests that were on the show how they become a Broncos fan. I myself became a fan collecting Orange Crush cans, the Sody Pop. That had the players on them and the stats they had. The year was 77 and 78. Plus, my dad was a Broncos fan. Why did you guys decide to be Broncos fans? Thanks. Love you guys. Cool story, man. Appreciate that. Little anecdote. We've talked about this many times, but Zac, the show continues to grow, and it gets exposed to new listeners and new viewers that don't know the full story. So let me just do the cliff notes really quick, and I'll let Zac do his cliff notes. Basically, for me, the way I got exposed to the Broncos orbit was I was indoctrinated as a young child, like many of you were, by my dad. All right. And then, I followed the Broncos as a kid, big time fan. John Elway posters, Three Amigos. I was a child of the 80s. And so the 90s Super Bowl victories late, that was joyous for me, just like it was for you guys. And then, I ended up getting into the business, into sports media, and the rest is history. Zac's path to this team, though, comes purely from the professional side, and that's where he is now. And, Zac, you can tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, most people who cover a team are fans of the team per se. You might have an emotional vested interest in the team, and I definitely do. They weren't my favorite team growing up, but one of my earliest memories as a football fan was the 98 AFC title game, where the Broncos obviously won that and went on to the Super Bowl. But covering them for half a decade now, it's crazy how time flies. I've really, they've got their claws into my heart. I'm really, if you want to classify me as a Broncos fan, that's fine. I have Broncos memorabilia everywhere around me, and they're just a very interesting team. And unfortunately, I came along at a time where they had just won the Super Bowl, and ever since then, they've been kind of not so great. So sorry about that. But yeah, I'd say the last 5 years, I'm bleeding orange and blue a lot more than I ever thought I would, Jen.
It's one of those things where, first of all, when you begin to cover a team, you can't help but become a fan a little bit. You just do. Right. I mean, it doesn't matter where you come from and what team you're covering. You end up having emotional investments in the team because your entire day grinds around that team. And so, you kind of go with the ups and downs. You still try to keep an objective lens on it. And even for me, Zac, as someone who came from a fan to media, the games, as much as when I watch the Broncos play, yes, I want the Broncos to win. You bet your bottom dollar. But it's not like it was back in the day where, man, I could feel my adrenaline up, like I was so invested. If they lost, ruined my day, ruined my week. If they won, it was, great week. All that stuff is way in the past. But we still are very passionate about the Denver Broncos, as you guys can tell, bringing you this content every day. Now, we got a question here from one of our Facebook supporters, Albert Knoppers, also a Super Chat superstar, hops on over to YouTube to support us there as well. Appreciate you, Albert, and your wife. He says, is there any news on the tackle from Utah? Speaking specifically, of course, to Darren Paulo, whom the Broncos claimed off waivers earlier this week. Zac, I haven't heard anything. I really haven't. No. And even if I had heard that he'd been dominating in training camp on third team, look, he's got 1 week to make an impression on this coaching staff. I think the best case scenario for him, Zac, is practice squad.
Yes, at most. I mean, I think he was a camp body coming in. Obviously, he's from the Broncos' backyard. They have some familiarity with him. They liked him enough to give him a contract, but coming into this kind of offseason so late in the process doesn't give you great roster odds. At best, that's a practice squad guy, and you never know, though. I mean, the more guys in the building, the more opportunity that one of them is going to pan out. It increases the odds they're going to find one diamond in the rough in terms of having a backup caliber lineman. So I haven't heard anything, and I think no news is bad news, though, for Paulo at this point.
Christian jumping in on Super Chat. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you.
He says, I just heard that Vaughn compared Drew Lock to Post Malone. I guess Lock's got to get out there and get a face tattoo.
Yeah, a bunch of them.
Two of those bad boys.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. I mean, they're both great entertainers, and they have a lot of charisma, and I can see the comparison, but I think Locke is a better quarterback than Post Malone is a rapper, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Although I'll say this, as a guy that comes from the rock side of things, Zac is a rap and a hip-hop guy, and I'm a rock guy, punk rock guy. But Nirvana was a band that was a punk rock band, and then the media christened them grunge, like it was this new thing, when really it was just kind of dirty rock. It was punk rock. But nevertheless, that's how I got really stoked about music. And like a lot of people in 92, I was like 12, 13 years old, something like that. And one thing that endeared Post Malone to me, I don't listen to his music, I'll be honest with you guys. But one thing, Zac, that endeared Post Malone to me was during the lockdown, like the depths of the lockdown, when it was really locked down, not just some places are open, some are closed. I mean, it was everything locked down in the month of April. He and Travis Barker of Blink 182, they did one of those live streams from his house, okay, and played a bunch of Nirvana songs, this long Nirvana set where they were just jamming. It was just rock music, and that made me kind of tip my cap to him. Some credibility, some rock credibility for Post Malone. All right, Duke, he's got to head out for the night. Catch you on the flip-flop, my friend. Appreciate your support as always. And as he says here, good reminder, subscribe, share it out there. Appreciate that, my friend, and have a good evening. Ricky here says, do you think it's possible that we have too much talent that it hurts us? Seems like we have a lot on both sides of the ball. I don't know. Is that a real question, Zach? Can you have more talent? Can you have so much talent that it hurts you? Or actually, let me ask you this. Is there a way in which having too much talent can hurt you?
Ask the Chiefs that question. I mean, there's literally no such thing of having too much talent. It comes down to coaching, though, Chad. I mean, look at the Cowboys roster. I mean, there's some other teams around the NFL that are just loaded for bear every single season, and they can't get past the wild card round, the divisional round. It comes down to coaching in the end, but there's literally no such thing as having too much talent. And that's why the Broncos doubled up at wide receiver, already having Cortland Sutton. They get Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. I think that exemplifies that theory, Chad.
Shout out to our friends that they do a lot of the same things we do, covering the Buffalo Bills in their neck of the woods, Buffalo Fanatics. Shout out to you guys. Roger, one of our Facebook supporters, takes precedence here with his question. Hi, guys. How are you doing? We're doing great. I'm just curious about what a game is going to look like without fans in the stadium. It's just weird watching basketball. What do you guys think it'll be like? It's going to be similar to that. You're not going to see, when they score, for the most part, when you see, Zach, the actual camera on, when you think of a play happening, you're watching television, you're watching the broadcast, and it happens going left to right on your screen, okay? You're not going to notice that there's no crowd, all right? Because all you're going to see is field.
Right.
But when they score a touchdown and the camera pans and then you see it's empty seats, that's when it's going to become really obvious. I think fans will get used to it, though, pretty quick, even though no one's going to love it. No one's going to find it to be ideal. I think fans will get used to it quicker than you think.
I think fans are just happy, as am I. I can speak for myself when there's just football. I mean, it's not ideal. It's not preferable. It's not normal. Absolutely not. But fans or no fans, as long as there's football on Sundays this fall, I'm good with it.
Bonafide superstar. Everybody knows Zachary Smouse. He's in the house. Much love to ZW Designs. Good to see you, my friend. Rocking the very t-shirt that he designed, the Mile High Huddle Let 'em Hate t-shirt. Appreciate you, Zachary, and your support, my friend. And we can't wait to get you on the show again here in the near future. He says, the offense is top 15. The defense is top 3. Philip Lindsay, 850 yards. Melvin Gordon, 700 yards. Zach, if Melvin Gordon gets 700 yards and they're paying him $8 million this year, how stoked are you going to be?
You know what? I don't want to be right because it means the Broncos won't be as good as they could have been. I want Gordon to do well because it makes the Broncos offense better. But $8 million for 700 yards, it's not real great in return on investment. The sad thing is I can see Lindsay being around 850 because Gordon's going to cut into his carries. But if Melvin Gordon being who he thinks he's this workhorse and this 1A kind of guy, if he can't crack 800 yards when he's taking carries from the other guy already, there is something wrong there. 750 yards, you pay that guy $1 million, not $8 million. Philip Lindsay's paying $750,000. That's what he's getting this season. And he's going to have more rushing yards than a guy making $8 million. There is something wrong with that picture, Chad.
Amen. I mean, the problem is, and this is one of the reasons why Zach and I have been critical of the Melvin Gordon deal since its inception, that's probably about where it's going to land. Like, I don't expect him to get more than 600, 700, 800 yards rushing, to be honest with you, because Philip Lindsay's a stud. You're going to take a bona fide playmaker, a dagger, a guy that is a threat to take it to the house every time he touches the ball off the field to bring in Melvin Gordon. Well, they're going to do that because they want their money's worth. He'll get his yards. But, Zach, for fans that are thinking Melvin Gordon's going to bust for 1,200 and Lindsay's going to get 1,000, no. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Extremely unlikely. So that's one of the reasons why we continue to kind of shake our head with regard to the Melvin Gordon deal. All right. Gary Smith jumping in. Do y'all think we could have 3 guys get 1,000 yards on our receiving core? Zach, I think Cortland Sutton's a lock for that. I think Jerry Jeudy's going to come really close. Do you see anyone else really threatening for that?
I mean, who's the other guy? KJ Hamler. And unless they run 4 wide packages all day, and he's not that type of talent. I know that what Chad Ochocinco said, 3 number 1 wide receivers, but KJ Hamler is that 700-800 yard a year guy for the most, in this offense anyway, being buried behind Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. I can see 2,000 yard guys, Chad, in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. I just don't see Hamler coming even close to that number.
I agree. I think the best thing to hope for is a 2,000-yard receivers and Noah Fant kind of threatening, but probably falling 150 to 250 yards shy. And that would still be a phenomenal season for Noah Fant. Zeus McPeek jumping in, showing his support. MHH, Mount Rushmore guy. In fact, he's the first face that was chiseled into the MHH Mount Rushmore is Zeus McPeek. And, Zach, the support is so consistent. And sometimes I think, fans and listeners of the show, they see the super chat on there and people become immune to it. But let me tell you how important this is. Stu has supported us on super chat every single time he's been in the chat stream, which I could probably count on one hand since we started doing these live streams on YouTube. Stu missing a live stream, probably on one hand, in all honesty. And guys, we don't have to do the YouTube thing. We got so many things going on with keeping our blog going and covering this team on the written side and fulfilling our duties over there. We do this because of you guys, and it's support like this from Stu and Zach and Terry and everybody else, Duke, Mundungus, that allows us to continue to focus our efforts as well on YouTube. So thank you. And Zeus, you're just, you mean everything to us, and we really appreciate you, dog.
Chad, I can't even follow that. That was perfectly said. And I just want to add that it's literally every single person. If we named every single superstar, it would take about 10 minutes. I mean, the level of growth and the dedication and support you guys have shown on a pod in and pod out basis leaves Chad and I at a loss for words. So just to piggyback on what Chad was saying, it's all for you guys, and we're very appreciative we get to do this 4 nights a week. And
we're humbled when you super chat and send us money like that. It humbles us, it motivates us. And make no mistake, though, it is what is funding our ability to do this content for you. So thank you, guys. And if you're not able to super chat, it's okay. If you're not in a position, we're not going to ask you to do that. But tip your cap to those who are fortunate enough to be able to do that, because it's given us the opportunity to bring this to you night in, night out.
Yes.
This is an interesting question, Zach. I've actually gotten it a couple times lately. People are wondering what happened to Joe Dineen, the linebacker from Kansas that the Broncos signed last year.
There's a name.
Guys, he was waived. I want to say waived injured months and months ago. He's no longer even on the Broncos' radar.
Oh, wow, that's a name right there. Considering how long 2020's been, Chad, it just feels like eons ago. He had that like Josie Jewell, Sternad type hype where Broncos fans thought he was going to be like the next, great inside linebacker. Never turned out. It just goes to show how hard it is to find a really, really good inside linebacker. They're very, very rare.
Yep. And in his defense, he did get hurt, and that led to the Broncos just saying, look, you ran out of sand in the hourglass to make an impression and catch you on the flip-flop. I don't even know where he is now. Jeff C. jumping in, another one of our consistent superstars.
Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate you, Jeff. Zach, phone Fangio. Let's get Prince Amukamara on the outside on a 1-year deal and move Bryce Callahan in the slot. Hashtag hire Prince. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life. Hashtag Denver Standard. And hashtag LFG. LFG. What's the LFG?
Let's blank.
Let's go. Yeah. Thank you. See, I need Zach for this. Next time I steal my kid's phone to see what they're up to, and I get these acronyms that I don't understand.
Just hit me up.
I'm calling Zach, dude. Just be like, oh, dude, here's what it means. Appreciate you, Jeff. And yeah, I mean, I think it was Luke Patterson. Yes, it was yesterday. Evening had a great article at milehighhuddle.com right after Isaac Adam got dealt away. Very opportunistic by Luke to get that out there because, there's the outside chance that, hey, with one extra spot, maybe they make an outside addition. But, Zach, it's just not trending that way. Prince Amukamara, for whatever reason, that's a ship that sailed for Vic Fangio. And we might not ever know the real reason why. And this has a lot to do, at least anyway, with why Yadam was dealt. Asang Bassi has been balling out. And thank you, Leroy, for being in the stream with us, my friend. Will he be the next Chris Harris Jr.? I love your optimism, but that is statistically from an odds perspective, Zach, so minimal. But hey, you got to love the optimism. Chris Harris Jr. is a one of a kind.
But considering the luck the Broncos have had with their undrafted free agents, I literally would not be surprised. Maybe not as good as Chris Harris Jr., who was arguably the premier slot cornerback of this generation. But if they can be anywhere close, Bassey, to Chris Harris Jr. level, the Broncos got a steal. And that's why I think they dealt Isaac Adams, because they like Bassey a lot.
Yep. Ron Dubb, speaking of the superstars that keep us going and keeping the lights on here at MHH YouTube. Appreciate you, Ron.
Thank you.
Always brings the good questions. He says, hey, guys, which player on offense will have the most red zone touchdowns this season? Also, which player in the secondary will be the beneficiary of the most picks?
Great question.
That's a really, really good one, especially the red zone one.
I got two.
You go first.
I mean, Sutton's the easiest choice there because he's the number one wide receiver, big body, big catch radius, but Noah Fant. I mean, this is a guy who's coming into his own. Drew Lock and him have that chemistry down the seam in the red zone between the 20s. I think he's going to lock onto Fant a lot. I would see Noah Fant having like 8 touchdowns, but only like 500, 600 yards. He's going to be that big in the red zone, and Courtland Sutton as well. I think those are the two obvious choices, Chad.
I don't disagree, but one thing I'll say to piggyback on that is, and it's not a bold prediction, but I think it's in the red zone is where you're going to see the Broncos' utilization of Alberto the most. You're going to, I think they're going to try and use that basketball frame and that playmaking ability inside the 20s here and there. When you do see Alberto, my bet will be when it's all said and done and we can chart his plays and look at the advanced analytics, the majority of them will come in red zone packages. Now, as far as most interceptions, I'm sticking with, actually, you know what? I'm saying AJ Bouye just because of how prolific he's already been in that department. And we know his career high back in 2017 when he made the Pro Bowl was 6. Justin Simmons is the next obvious choice there, but I'm probably going to roll with Bouye just because I do sense a resurgent season for him in 2020.
1,000% agree, Chad. Yeah, I see him maybe not 6 interceptions, but maybe like 3 or 4. This is a guy who was taking the ball away from receivers in training camp. He was out muscling Courtland Sutton. He's returned to that, I'm not going to say all-pro form, but definitely the old Jaguars Boye and not the new Jaguars Boye like what we saw last year. And I think a lot of teams aren't that familiar with him. They don't believe he's that much better. So you might see opposing quarterbacks target him in coverage. And if you target him, and if he's the old Boye, he's going to make you pay. Simmons is the easy choice, but Boye is just a natural playmaker. Interceptions just magnetized to his hands, Chad.
Darian P. about Todd Davis posting on Twitter that he'll be ready for week 1. Have we seen him? He has been working back into action. He's not participating yet in team, so he's not participating in 11 on 11. But he is working some in individual with trainers on the sideline. So I don't see any. I know the Broncos have it written in Sharpie that he's going to be back in time for week 1. He's posting about it on Twitter. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that at this stage. The question is, Zach, if there were a setback, who starts next to Alexander Johnson? Would it be the new transplant Mark Barron, or would it be Josie Jewell, you think?
You know what? It's easy for a Broncos fan to say Mark Barron, considering he was the latest addition, but he has no time to learn the playbook. And I think Fangio, being an NFL lifer, he's aware that Mark Barron is not a prototypical inside linebacker. I think it would be Josie Jewell to start out next to A.J. Johnson and to work in Barron and pass coverage situations, third down situations. Mark Barron is not a 3-down linebacker. He's not really even a linebacker, but against the run, he doesn't offer much. He's more of a pass coverage kind of guy. So I think in base and early downs, you see Josie Jewell, and then Mark Barron on passing downs and third down situations. But I will say again, I have never been happier to see Todd Davis healthier right now. He has to be on the field for the Broncos this year, because the more Barron plays, the worse the Broncos defense will be.
And one of the things too, Zach, that I think bears mentioning is the reason why Davis and Johnson at times just looked so janky in coverage. You got to remember, the Broncos cornerbacks were crap last year. Even Chris Harris Jr. had literally his worst year as a pro, and they had no depth. It was just a who's who of young guys trying to figure out their way through the NFL. And I think this time around, because you're going to have Bouye, you're going to have stability there. You're going to have stability with Bryce Callahan. And when it goes into sub packages and he kicks inside, that next guy that takes the field, whether it ends up being Devontae Bosby, or if the Broncos are thinking about keeping Callahan on the boundary and bringing in Sang Bassey, which I think is unlikely, I still think their plan for sub packages Devontae Bosby outside, Callahan inside, and then Bouye. But nevertheless, I think you're going to see that take a lot of pressure off these linebackers, and they're not going to look so fish out of water when it comes to coverage.
And the pass rush, too. I mean, having Chubb back and being Bond, if they can get to the quarterback, it would mitigate them having to hold up in pass coverage. So the defense being better overall will help the inside linebackers.
All right, one thing I want to talk about real quick here, and then we'll get to what super chats are left, because we do not ignore or leave any of our superstars out in the cold. Your defensive line picks. I have to concur with you on this, Zach. It's not what I want to see happen, but if we're making predictions in which we want our audience and our community to hold us accountable for, this seems to be the most likely. 6 defensive linemen being kept, to wit: Gerald Casey, Shelby Harris, Draymond Jones, Mike Purcell, McTelvin Ajim, Christian Covington. I do think this is the last stand of DeMarcus Walker, and I think because he's just one of those guys that even though he's in his 4th year, Zach, the lack of preseason crushed his shot at the roster. So unless they decide to go light at another position in order to make room for Walker, I don't think he beat out Covington. I don't see it.
I was actually hemming and hawing about just carrying 5 defensive linemen, maybe even cutting Covington as well. But I think they picked him up for a reason. I like what he brings to the table. He's a pretty solid all-around defensive lineman. DeMarcus Walker, it pained me to write that, and it pains me to talk about because you and I are 2 of his biggest fans out there, Chad. Living legend 44. But it just 2 coaching staffs now, 2 different regimes, can't get on the field consistently. When he is, he's always making plays. We talked about this yesterday, but he's just not able to get on the field. And if you can't get on the field for Vic Fangio, you don't have a future in this Denver defense. And like you said, if it was me and my bias and thinking with my heart, I would have predicted Walker on the roster, but I'm thinking with my brain and keeping it realistic. And I have to just be honest and objective with the Broncos.
I still think there are plenty of solid football reasons to keep Walker for his contract year and let him play out his full 4-year rookie deal. I just don't think the Broncos are thinking that way. So, all right, one last thing I wanted to bring up about your 53 is you've got on the cornerback side, of course, you've got Bassey making it with Isaac Yiadom getting dealt, Devontae Harris, Michael Ojemudia, Devontae Bosby. Based on the developments of the last 2 days, nothing particularly surprising about that, with the exception of Duke Dawson. I think you're right. He's a goner. I don't think he makes this roster this time around. But he could be one of those guys, one of those veterans, you know. He might actually have some practice squad eligibility. We'll see. But he's a guy I could see them trying to sneak onto the practice squad. But he might garner interest elsewhere because of that second-round pedigree. But what I wanted to get your take on is on the safety side, you have the Broncos keeping Elijah Holder, which is interesting because for fans who might have missed it, Elijah Holder, undrafted corner out of Stanford last year that played corner as a rookie, made an appearance on the 53-man roster late in the year when the Broncos started getting decimated with injuries to corner and injuries to safety. They eventually decided, hey, we're moving him to safety, period. And he has looked pretty good out there this year. Not as good as Trey Marshall as far as the backup safeties, but he's looked a lot better than Douglas Coleman. And I'll be honest, I had some high hopes for Douglas Coleman.
Same. Yeah.
I think he's going to be one of those practice squad guys. And I like your decision to go with Elijah Holder, but what was your explanation or rationale behind that?
This might have been the hardest position group to nail down because after Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, we haven't heard much about these safeties. And the Broncos never really replaced Will Parks, and it shows, Chad. I mean, Trey Marshall's been a guy. He's been around for a while now through different coaching staffs. He obviously has shown something to Fangio. He'll make it by default because the Broncos have to carry at least 3 safeties. Who's the 4th guy, though, if they go 4? Is it PJ Locke? Is it Douglas Coleman? Is it Elijah Holder? I just like his flexibility, having a cornerback background. If there's an injury in the cornerback group, he can play corner as well. He's a young guy that Fangio can develop and mold, and he's been in the building longer than Douglas Coleman has. So I like his odds better.
Chris Hernandez, everybody knows Chris, 24-year veteran of the Air Force. Much love to you, my friend. And, you know, we appreciate you for what you do to MHH and what you mean to MHH and what you do serving this country.
Thank you.
It says, a lot of good questions tonight, MHH fam. Keep them coming. Hashtag click those little thumbs up. Appreciate the reminder, as always, and the support, Chris. And I hope you're doing well tonight. Quick question here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's keep it here. Buck the Fuffs. Man, that's tongue tie. I could almost say something I shouldn't say on these airwaves. Buck the Fuffs 55. That's my dog's name, my new dog, Buck. What about, appreciate the super chat. And by the way, Zach, not a name obviously that we recognize on super chat. So
welcome.
Sir. Thank you. Appreciate you. What about McTelvin Ajim? I love the pick. Tons of talent. Do you guys think he will get meaningful playing time this year? Define meaningful. I think
literally was going to say that.
I do think he's going to get used here and there as a rotational interior pass rusher. I'm still wondering what they're going to do when you need to spell Mike Purcell, because he's a guy that, because he's a hefty dude at nose tackle. Typically they play 50% snaps, somewhere around there. And there's a good reason for it that doesn't have to do with conditioning. Sub packages are so common now that a lot of times they take that big nose out and they bring in another 5 tech, type guy, a guy who's a little bit, he's still big, defensive line, 300 pounds, but can move a little bit more. Who's going to be that nose tackle behind Purcell if and when he needs spelled, or if he gets banged up? I think it's going to be McTelvin Ajim. But then again, Zach, it could be Christian Covington,
right,
who both of us have making this 53.
That's what I think as well. You might even see, Gerald Casey playing some nose tackle. He's a bigger body and he can definitely penetrate or stop the run. He's
so
good in
wide.
both. Right.
Wide,
good in both.
Man.
He's a big wall there in the middle of that defense. And I think it will be him or one of the guys. They can platoon. They can kind of, make up for the differences if Purcell gets hurt or he needs to be spelled. In terms of Ajim, though, this is not a pick I think the Broncos made for 2020. I think they made this pick for 2021 and beyond when Shelby Harris might be gone. Gerald Casey's getting up there. He's not a 10-year type contributor for the Broncos defense. He's kind of a guy who's holding the fort down now. Ajim, like Chad said, define meaningful. I think he will definitely get some snaps. He will make the roster. He will see the field. Is he going to be 70% of snaps? I don't think so. 60? I don't think so. 50? I don't think so. Is he going to be a starter? I don't think so, barring an injury. He's going to be in the rotation, but just more of a bit player and contributor until next season, Chad.
All right, as we close out tonight's Mile High Mailbag, we got to go through in rapid fire the Mile High Huddle supporters. We have a thread that we put in here for the mailbag for the supporters only on Facebook. Let's run through these really quick, Zach, rapid fire, and then we'll say goodnight. Jerry Holland jumping in, as you guys can see here. He says, first game fun prediction, boys. How many touchdowns? Who reels those in? I think, Zach, probably, I want to say the spread's like 46 points is, I think, something like that. I think it's going to be like a 23-20 type of game.
Yep.
I'm guessing Cortland Sutton gets one, and I'm guessing Phillip Lindsay gets one. What do you got?
You're reading my mind tonight, Chad. I do think it will go one of those two ways. In terms of the score, I think like I said, 19-16, like 2 touchdowns and a bunch of field goals. It's going to be a sloppier game than I think most Broncos fans are thinking, but 2 touchdowns I'm predicting. The Broncos win 19-16. I think it'll be Sutton. And just to change it up a little bit, I'm going to say Noah Fant. 2 guys in the red zone for Drew Lock to catch a couple touchdowns.
All right, I just made it a little bit bigger on our screen. Hopefully you guys can see these questions that the fellas have here a little bit closer. Steve Griffith, I'll follow Jerry's lead. How many sacks will Ryan Tannehill suffer? And who gets the first sack of the season? Zach, I'm saying Gerald Casey, and I'm saying that they sack him 4 times.
I was going to say 4. I think Casey does have one, but I think Vaughn is going to get the first sack. Though Casey's sack will be a sack fumble that the Broncos recover, and he's going to swing the game in Denver's favor. That's my bold take for Gerald Casey in week 1.
Albert Knoppers, of course, great superstar and also Facebook supporter. Would a new strength and conditioning coach be a good thing now that the season is about to start?
Yes.
You guys know how we feel about it. It's not gonna happen though.
Right.
So don't even. It's not something on a realistic level that you would expect to see on the doorstep of a regular season. These teams have their regimens, Zach. They have their rhythms in place with regard to strength and conditioning. We might criticize Lauren Landau, but the team seems to love him. So it is what it is.
I think next offseason they might make a change. I think Landau and Tom McMahon could be on the firing line. But for now, with the season, 10 days away, they're not going to make any changes. 11 days, whatever it is.
Can the kicker, this is Albert's last one, be the punter as well? Would save a roster spot. Hey, man, I love the creativity. There are some guys out there that have and had the ability to do that, but it's just not something you see in the NFL. Teams like guys to specialize and focus on one or the other. That's just the way it is nowadays.
Yeah, and you know what? They can spare a spot for Sam Martin, who should be an upgrade on Colby Wadman. It's not saying much, but he's a consistent punter, should help flip field position. And you know what? After Brandon McManus has struggled the last couple of years, I don't want him to focus on anything else than just drilling field goals. I think that's his responsibility. It's what he does best.
All right, last one here, gang, from Hardy. Who is this year's diamond in the rough? Any undrafted rookies making the team that have a chance to play much? Asang Bassey's making this team. I don't think Levante Bellamy's making the team, the running back. We don't think that, as we mentioned just a few minutes ago, Coleman's making it. Trying to think. I think Kendall Hinton, the wide receiver from Wake Forest, former quarterback turned wide receiver his final year in college. He's impressed a lot of people in camp this year. He'll get a practice squad spot. Mark my words. Him and Trinity Benson, I think they'll keep on the practice squad, depending on what happens with Tyree Cleveland. If Tyree Cleveland makes the roster, then they'll keep those two guys. If Tyree Cleveland ends up trying to be snuck onto the practice squad, Zach, I think probably Trinity Benson. Well, one of those two is on the outside looking in. I don't know which one it would be, but I think that diamond in the rough, speaking specifically about undrafted rookies, it's got to be Asang Bassey.
Yeah, like I wrote in my 53 prediction, this season, this offseason, having no practice and no training camp, pretty much, and no preseason, the Broncos, I expect few surprises from them. They're going to go with veterans and proven players and take less gambles than they would normally on rookies and undrafted guys. There's going to be one undrafted free agent who makes the 53 and also contributes significantly, and that's the guy Chad just mentioned, Asang Bassey. So look out for him this year.
Also, Casey's asking if KUSA, if 9 News is going to air Friday night scrimmage at the stadium. I don't think they're doing that. I think this last one, the first one, was kind of the big to-do that they allowed KUSA to come in and sponsor and all that stuff. I don't think they're doing that this time around. There will be media there, but it's not going to be televised as far as I know. There's been no press release talking to the team guys, no broadcast coming. Justin says, only one sack from a pissed-off Casey? I don't know. I think he's going to stuff Derrick Henry for a loss more than once, and if the Titans try and lean on the pass, then Casey's going to get 2.5 sacks. Revenge, baby. Hey, man, there's no telling what emotion can do to accentuate and improve a player's performance, Zach. I mean, think back to when Brett Favre lost his dad and he went out on Monday Night Football against the freaking Raiders and played lights-out ball, completely overwhelmed in mourning, but somehow it kicked him into go out and get her done type mode, and he went above and beyond. That's a far cry from Casey being pissed, someone losing their father. That's a far cry from Lindsay or Casey being upset that he got traded away for a 7th-round pick. But the point being, you never know how emotions can fuel a guy. So Justin might not be completely off base, but I'm going to keep my expectations relatively, solid. 1 sack. Lots of big plays, though. I do think you're going to see him make some big plays.
Casey said he felt the Titans discarded him like trash. So obviously he's pissed off. Obviously he's motivated and he wants to show his former team they shouldn't have traded him away. Like Chad said, I'm keeping it realistic, and I think that 1 sack will come in crunch time, the 4th quarter, when he turns the game with a sack fumble on Tannehill. But in all the game, in all those 3 quarters before that, you will see him making tackles for losses, stuffing Derrick Henry, getting after the passer, because pressure is production too. Sacks aren't the end-all, be-all. If he can force Tannehill out of the pocket, if he can fluster Tannehill, that's just as good almost as getting a sack. So he will show up big this game, Gerald Casey, and the entire season for Denver. Probably my favorite pickup of the entire offseason, Gerald Casey.
Amen. Amen, my friend. And AJ Bouye too, man. It's close. I think when it's all said and done, man, we're just gonna be going, how did the Broncos get both these guys? Like
7th-round pick for a 5-time Pro Bowler. I can't get over it.
And he's not that old. Yes, it's his 10th season. So he was a draft pick in 2011, just like Vaughn. So they're a little long in the tooth, but they're not so long in the tooth that you just get rid of them for a bucket of KFC.
Yeah.
All right, gang, before we get out of here, we got to remind you to head on over to sportsbetting.com and enter into the $1 million football pick'em and get a chance to win that cheddar. It's really fun. You get to see the spreads on all 16 games for the season opener. Go check that out, sportsbetting.com. All right, that's got to do it, gang, for tonight's episode. Thanks to each and every one of you for giving us some of your time, for contributing to the conversation, for your questions. A mile-high salute to our Super Chat superstars and our Facebook supporters. We love you guys. Hopefully you know how much we love you, and we talked quite a bit about that tonight. You're very meaningful to us, and it keeps us spinning here at MHH. So we got to get out of here, though. Make sure you're following the podcast on Twitter. It's crucial, gang. If you're on Twitter and you're not following the podcast account and you're watching these live streams every day, what the heck are you doing? Follow the account at Huddle Up Pod while you're at it, at Mile High Huddle. And then whatever you do, make sure you're following my partner, Zack Kelberman, on Twitter at Kelberman NFL. You can find me at Chad and Jensen. And before I forget, you got to follow our producer, Buona Beast. On Twitter, he goes by at John K. John Cronenberg, that's his name, at John K, JONKAYMHH. Follow him there. Great follow. If you're a Broncos fan, trust me, you want to be following John K. He finds all kinds of cool stuff, and you're not going to want to miss that as a follower. But we're off tomorrow night. You're going to get a fresh episode of Dove Valley Deep Divers, followed by on Saturday, Mile High Insiders. We'll be back Sunday night, and we're going to have Christy on the show. Everybody knows Christy. I didn't see her in the chat stream tonight. She probably got things going on, but she's going to join us Sunday night. It's going to be a gas. We're going to kick off officially, Zach, game week. Sunday begins game week. It's finally here, and we get to celebrate that. And in the meantime, we want you all to have a fun, safe Labor Day. Enjoy yourselves. You got anything special planned this weekend, Zach, besides work?
Roster cutdown day, Saturday. So that's going to dominate my weekend and my time as always. But you know what? It's for the greater good. Give us stuff to talk about, and it makes football season that much closer. So I'm always looking forward to that day because it means football is right around the corner.
Amen. And if you're traveling, a lot of us do. A lot of people head to the mountains, head to the beach. Be safe in your travels. And we will see you Sunday night. Meanwhile, if you want to participate in the Mile High Huddle Fantasy Football League this year, you're running out of time to let us know and get us your email address. So either reach out to Zach, reach out to myself in a DM, or email us, milehighhuddle@gmail.com. Make it plain that you want to play. Make sure we have your email address, and we'll be unveiling over the weekend. When you hear from us on Sunday, we'll have a plan in place for the draft and the whole 9 yards. So if that's something you want to do, go against Zach, myself, the other MHH guys in fantasy football, and try and take out this dude who wrecked shop last year in the MHH Fantasy League. Make sure you reach out to us and get us your email address. All right, guys, we got to get out of here. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We'll see you on Sunday. Have a great Labor